Okay, I gotta ask, Michael, how many books out there are ghostwritten, do you think?
When you
Percentage?
walk into a bookstore, 90% of those books are ghostwritten.
What? That is crazy. Oh my gosh. Jeez, I gotta get on the bandwagon. Welcome to another round of the Relaunch podcast. This show, I'm telling you, everyone, sit down, get on that treadmill, do whatever you're going to do, but plan to be energized, plan to take it to that next level, because this guy is going to deliver. And for all of you aspiring authors out there, or for those that are thinking about their next book, we're going to hit everything you need to know. And the person I am talking about, he is the infamous Michael D. Butler. And here's the greatest part. People have often referred to him as the Simon Cowell of the authoring space, of this book publishing. And he is it not only just, it's not just US, we're talking global book publisher. He's got authors in 63 countries, and I'm sure growing. And did you say 1,000 books that are now out there, Michael?
Almost 1,000. We're at 794 now. We'll hit our 1,000th next year.
You know what? I am doing my energetic big hug to you. I am so excited to have you on the show, because I really think that this is becoming, it's almost like your calling card. It's who you are. It's what, people will say, well, do you have a book? Do you have a book? And everyone has a book inside of them, everybody. But there's a lot of fear out there around starting the process. And before I go into all of that, I always like to take people back to what was the significant relaunch in your past that kind of brought you full circle to where you are today.
Great to be here, Hilary. I've heard a lot of great things, been following you for a good while, and love what you're doing with Relaunch. I think as humans, we always want to be recalibrating, reassessing, relaunching. And I read recently that our cells regenerate every 7 years. Well, our mind should be generating very rapidly as well, right? Our soul, our spirit, we should constantly be reading and feeding, and a lot of people thought the internet killed publishing, but quite the opposite is true. Readership is up globally. Book consumption is up globally. And just like the printing press brought us out of the dark ages and brought us the Renaissance, this internet explosion with knowledge is being doubled in many industries on a monthly basis. And so, people say, well, yeah, everybody tells me I should publish a book, but here's the thing: there's 4 million new books published in the U.S. alone, which is about 10 million globally. And so, but
Michael, before you move on, when you say 4 million books published, is that annually? What is that?
Yeah, that's in the U.S. Every year. This year in 2023, there were about 4 million books that were self-published, traditionally published, or published through a hybrid publisher, fiction and nonfiction all together. Think about that. And yet readership is up globally. People are consuming content. And that's why I'm so excited to be here with you today. Number one reason people write a book is for credibility. To get credibility as an author, to go bestseller. It makes sense if you're doing nonfiction and you're a coach, a consultant in insurance, or, you have a services business to get your name out there, right? But what about that fiction author who's writing their first, second, or third book? Why it's advantageous for them to get a book out?
But it's interesting, because a lot of people might be like, 4 million. Oh, how am I ever going to get through the clutter of 4 million? What was it 5 years ago? Or what was it even 3 years ago? Has the pandemic kind of changed people and now more people are writing books? What was it before you're saying there's going to be 4 million this year?
Yeah, exponentially. I think if memory serves me correct, 4 years ago, it was just 1 million in the US. So we pretty much have quadrupled in about 4 years. And yeah, the pandemic spiked not only binge consumption of streaming movies, but also books.
I love that people are reading more these days because I am an avid reader. If I could spend hours upon hours during the day reading, I would. I love it that much. And I go between the Audible and actually the paperback. I love flipping over the pages, writing myself notes. I have this whole technique where I write them on a certain beginning of the front flap so I can always go back to what was the main thing I really wanted to take away from this book. But I got to take you back again. You weren't just all of a sudden the Simon Cowell of book publishing. There's a story here that got you to where you are today in 63 countries. And I do want to share that with our listeners.
Well, I think going way back, I'm 55 now, but I was an 11-year-old kid that stuttered, and my librarian saw me struggling. And she was led to give me this book that was written by an 11-year-old kid when I was 11. I don't remember the name of the book. I don't remember the name of the author. I just remember there was a picture of a sailboat on the front of this book. And it fascinated me that this kid, and so I'm sitting there on the farm, Hilary, looking up at the sky and daydreaming and getting a bigger picture and a bigger vision for my life. And I see these planes flying over on the farm, and there's my dog, there's the cows and my brother. And I'm telling everybody that will listen, one day I'm going to fly around the world on these planes and speak to thousands of people. And so we've been to 30 nations now supporting our authors and seeing that happen.
I love impact.
Never underestimate the power of a book.
This is an impact moment that actually really solidifies that you had a dream. And we talk about manifestation and law of attraction. You didn't even know what you were doing, but the base of what really inspired you was this 11-year-old author who wrote this book. Your teacher, you had the stuttering librarian, and what did you do to get over the stuttering first? Because in our family, we have, several. One of my kids had a stuttering when they were little. And fortunately, there was this incredible teacher that helped her right away get over it. And my cousin, and lots of kids have this. I know President Biden has a stuttering. But what is the way that that you handled it, that people could learn from your kind of your accomplishment here, because you've taken it so far?
Well, for me, Hilary, we were on a 30-acre farm in Oklahoma, just my brother and I with our dog and my parents. And I started producing movies. That's the vision I saw. And I think reading this book sparked it. I began producing movies as an 11-year-old on the farm, in my mind, in my imagination, with my cows and my dog Joe and my brother. And we would set these movies up and cut to commercial, and then we would sell the products on the commercial. So it helped me get over stuttering by stepping into this role play and this imagination of being a movie producer.
Okay, so you were going into the future identity that you were
in the time machine. And that's what books do. They put you in a time machine where you can go back or you can go into the future.
Okay, this is so great. So then you started to do these, movies, and you're everything, right? You're doing it all. You're the director, you're the star, you're the producer, exactly. You're doing everything. And when did you actually write your first book?
So my first book was The Single Dad Survival Guide. I wrote it in 2015. And I wrote it because a few years before I'd gone through a divorce, 4 young sons, 10, 8, 6, and 4. And I began to look on the internet and realize, hey, there's a lot of resources out here for single moms, and there's not much for single dads. And I was all set to launch my first book idea to bestseller in 30 days, which has done really well, been an international phenomenon, helped thousands of people write their first book. But one of my authors, who's also a psychologist from Poland, suggested that I publish The Single Dad Survival Guide first because it would help fill that need for men. Now, here's the interesting thing about that book. Always does really good around Father's Day and Christmas, but men don't buy books. Women buy and read 90% of the books in the world. Men just go to their cave or talk to their friends. They don't really buy books and do research. So the way we packaged that Single Dad Survival Guide was as a gift book that you could buy for the man in your life going through a divorce. So realize as you're writing your book, the person you're writing to might not even be the actual person that's going to buy it. So you got to figure out how you're going to appeal to that person that's going to buy the book for the friend in their life.
That it goes back to your, early days at 11 where you're doing commercials midway between and trying to figure out who are you targeting. That is so true. You have to really be aware. Relaunch, and I have a book, Relaunch, Spark Your Heart to Ignite Your Life. And relaunches, people have them all the time. But when are they willing to actually I now need to focus on it now? Year end, beginning of the year, and kind of around end of quarters, beginning of quarters, right? There's that, I got to do something. Summer is a big one too.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I want to talk to you about is, and you briefly just, touched on it, was this concept around you've got self-publishing, hybrid publishing, traditional publishing. Which one is the best?
That's the question we get a lot. And in fact, there's no right answer that applies to everybody. It's different for everybody. And so, but I'll just give you a quick rundown on each of them so your listeners can kind of be aware and make a decision, be informed, and make the proper decision. It used to be in the 70s and 80s, all we had was traditional publishing. And if you wanted to get a book deal, you went to a New York City publisher, you signed the rights away to them. That was the downside, is you signed away the rights, but the upside was they gave you global distribution. But the other downside was they only pay you about 7 to 15%. And so you can never repurpose the content on your own, on your blog, or anywhere else because they purchased the content. And if it got optioned for a movie deal, you were cut out of the deal. So
let me ask you, you said that was in the 70s and 80s. Is that still the case that you would end up with 7% of the net profit, or 10% or 12% of the 15, maybe? What did you say? 7 to
15. So that's
7 to 15. Is that still
their model today? So that's still the model. Now, with a traditional publisher, you're not out of pocket any investment as the author to do any of the editing, cover design, or setup of the book and get it globally distributed. But at the same time, it takes them about 3 years to get somebody queued up. So unless you're Joel Osteen or Oprah Winfrey, it's probably not going to happen, nor would you want it to happen, because you're not getting the bang for the buck, and you're also not able to repurposing the content. But the other thing is they kind of own you, because you got to go around to all the speaking gigs and the bookstore signings that they tell you've got to show up for. And then if you do get an advance, it's just a payday loan against your future royalties. And that's what a lot of authors need to understand. So that's traditional publishing. Let's talk about self-publishing. That's where you do everything yourself. And that became popular with Amazon and KDP of, now I can get my book up. I don't need a publisher. And it's true. Anybody can publish your book on Amazon. The downside to that is Amazon is only 50% of the world's book sale. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Super interesting there. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go more into that in a second and tell you why that is. It's the average self-published author never sells more than 200 copies, because Amazon is not an aggressive sales channel. It's a retail shop. It started with books, but now it has everything. So they are selling in 15 countries, but they're still only 50% of the world's book sales.
That is super interesting. I did not know about the 15 countries either, and did not know about 50% of the book sales worldwide. Super interesting, because I actually have a hybrid book. I went through a hybrid publisher, and you're going to get into the details of that. And I found the whole process so interesting, but I want you to keep going with, okay, so then there's self-publishing. You own all the rights. So that's the upside on self-publishing. You own all the rights. You make 100% of the royalties. But if your book's not selling, it's really not a win-win. So you want to say, what is best for me? Where self-publishing would be wise would be, say, a full-time speaker that's traveling the world. But I think even then, because it's so hard to get a self-published book into bookstores and libraries, and
the libraries are the number one buyers of books. And so when you self-publish, it's nearly impossible to get it into bookstores and libraries. And the other thing,
Okay.
we've gone so global since the pandemic is people are buying books in 190 nations now, and you need global distribution beyond Amazon. So for example, Amazon's not in South Africa. They're not in other countries. And so if you're speaking on a webinar, you want people to be able to buy your book in Brazil, to be able to buy your book in South Africa, to be able to buy your book all over Europe, not just in England and Germany. And so, hybrid is a solution.
Michael, I have to tell you a funny thing. So
Okay.
when I travel, and I do a lot of global travel, I bring a few copies of my book and I literally place them in different places along my vacation, or if I'm speaking somewhere, and I'll leave them. And then I'll say, well, we are in South Africa because I was there and there are 3 books in South Africa. That's great. Okay. And that was really interesting. I have to say, I'm going to go back to the 200 is the average of the amount of books that usual self-published authors sell. That's the average.
Right. Whereas a hybrid author is going to average more like 1,000 to 5,000 books. And so the other thing, Hilary, to consider is when you're self-publishing, you're paying for your editing, you're hiring a cover designer, you're paying for the interior design, you're trying to figure out how to do the EPUB conversion, you're trying to figure out how to make it #1 on Amazon. So you're watching a lot of YouTube videos, and you're spending a lot of money. And it's like doing your own plumbing. You can do that, or do you just want to make a phone call?
Okay, so I know where you're going. I'm clearly seeing the writing on the wall. That we are yes, that you really are a big proponent of hybrid.
You know, book publishing started in the caves. It was hieroglyphics. Speaking of writing on the wall, that's how they passed down. It was oral traditions around the campfire, and it was the history told on the paintings on the wall. But yeah, hybrid publishing is hot for a lot of people. And one reason it's grown so much in the last few years is because the little guy can get global distribution now. You don't have to be with a New York Simon and Schuster. You can be somebody that's not a celebrity, but you've got a powerful message, and you can get into the same channels, hundreds of outlets, including Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com, walmart.com, target.com, of course, Amazon, but Chapters up in Canada. They're the big retailer. They're the Barnes & Noble of Canada. And if you self-publish, you're not in Chapters. And so it's so important if you want to do a book signing and call a bookstore. If you're self-published, you're never going to get in. But if you're with a hybrid publisher that's enabled your book for global distribution, I've got a client flying in tomorrow from Sydney, Australia. We called a New York bookstore. She's coming in to do a book signing next week. It was literally that easy.
And the authors that you work with in this hybrid approach, how much of the sales do they get versus the 7 to 15%?
That's a great question. This is something you really want to look at in your contract because it's going to be spelled out in black and white. Our authors get 100% of the books they personally sell and 50% of the books that we sell for them through all of our channels globally.
That is incredible. So if somebody has a book that they've already self-published, is it possible to come to somebody like you and say, I have this book, I now want to do a hybrid publisher on it because they've self-published?
Yeah. And we get that a lot. And so we do help them all day long. The way that we're able to help them is to get them in broader global distribution. What we normally recommend is a second edition to their book, where we update the ISBN in the Library of Congress so that they're recognized by the Library of Congress. We actually send a copy of everybody's book to Washington, D.C. Library of Congress so they can get into libraries. And then also with that second edition of the book, we come out with a hardcover. If they haven't done a hardcover yet, if they haven't received an Amazon bestseller and bestseller status, we make that happen because it's important. A lot of people say, is that hokey? All my friends are going Amazon bestseller. It is important to juice the algorithms, okay? It's important to get that working for you. Plus, you get to be an Amazon bestselling author for life. And so those are good questions. That's what
you know, when I was trying to make this very important decision around my book, one, I really wanted to own the asset. Right. I wanted to make sure that I was a part of, like, if I wanted to go teach at on stage, I didn't want to have to reach out to the traditional publisher and say, hey, can I borrow your content, even though it's my content? And so that was a big one. And also, as you said, it can be up to 3 years. I mean, things are so instant. Is the relevancy of your book going to be relevant in 3 years? I needed it to happen. But I do have a funny manifestation story around this. I do this all the time, and I have a process called 3HQ, headquarters of yourself, head, heart, highest self. And I put myself through this when I was deciding on, the book and everything. And I said, I really want to learn how to actually write a book. I want to understand the processes. I want to get, into every detail. Well, the universe delivered. And I ended up in a very, very detailed course on how to learn to write a book. It took a year. It was, I had to do all, the research and the citing. And there was one point in my book, I was talking about law of attraction. Yeah. And my editor said, okay, what is the law of attraction? I said, what? Everyone knows what that is. No, I don't know what that is. Where did this law come from? Who developed it? It was so funny because I'm like, but I did during the process. Yes. I did learn a lot about book writing, book publishing, and there are different hybrid companies out there. Can you share with us because you've obviously done this, you're very successful. As you said, you're going to be reaching 1,000 here come the new year. What is so special about your process?
Well, we've ghostwritten about 247 books in the last 7 years, and about half of the books that we ghostwrite for clients, and these are billionaires, bankers, coaches, and insurance agents, and real estate moms, and network marketing moms, and startups that have gotten off a TED stage, but they don't have a book yet. And so a lot of times we will ghostwrite them a fiction book. So it can be optioned for film, and they can get on stage and talk about anything. They're not trying to be the next Napoleon Hill and compete with everybody else's how-to book. They're actually doing something really cool that can be optioned for a movie. So our process, we actually have a writing course. It's interesting you mentioned that. It's called Write Your Book in 1 Hour. And I teach this. It's an ongoing.
Not 1 year. This sounds good already.
Yeah. Well, pre-pandemic, I used to teach the course, Write Your Book in 60 days. And then we collapsed it because it's really a decision. I'll never forget my first marathon. I realized, hey, I was going to run a marathon by the time I'm 40. I wake up one day, I'm 39 and a half. I'm overweight. I'm on the couch. I put on my jogging shoes. I go out and run a block, and I'm out of breath. The next day I go out and run a block in 2 mailboxes. I can't breathe. And I go to Google and I type in running shoes, and I see an ad for running group. I joined the running group 6 months later because I put it on social media, and because I joined a group and held myself accountable, I got it done. So when it comes to writing your book, you can literally write the book in an hour. And we teach that all the time at beyondwebinar.com.
Okay. Are you using a lot of AI these days?
No, we're not using any AI. That's all human.
Wow. I need to hear more about that. But what I really want to understand then is, for the people out there that have a story in their head, and they're trying to figure out really how, why do you believe an entrepreneur today absolutely must be writing a book?
Well, it's really the credibility piece, because speakers bureaus say that if you're a speaker, you're 68% more likely to get the media interview and the speaking gig against the others that do not have a book. So that's 68%. And
does it, Michael, go up when you have a second book, a third book? I know Joe Vitale said the other day he's got like almost 100 or something.
Absolutely. Hall of Fame speaker Jim Cathcart, we just published his 24th book. He's spoken in China 30 plus times. And so every time he comes out with a new book, he's in the top speakers of the world. And
I had him on the show. He's absolutely, for everyone out there, go listen to the episode. It was fantastic. The information he gave on speaking on stages. Wonderful.
So he comes out with 2 books a year at least, and he is very prolific. He's at this stage in his life where he's mentoring, and he's even started a publishing house where we're running the back end of the publishing company for him. We do that for a lot of people, and he's been so much fun to work with. But to answer your question, yes, the second, third, fourth, fifth book, it's just puts you in rock star status at that point.
So it really does help to elevate you. What does the process of working with you look like in terms of if you're not going to be, well, we could talk about ghostwriting versus writing yourself. And do you recommend one versus the other? There's so much hype out there about authenticity and, the stories. And I look at the blood, sweat, and tears that I had writing this book and the weekends and the late nights, sometimes all nighters that I pulled on my book. And when do you recommend a ghostwriter versus writing it on your own?
There's no right answer on that. It depends on every circumstance is different. A lot of CEOs that we work with are very busy. They just don't have time to do it. Nobody knows it's ghostwritten, but it is a growth process for the author either way, and they're still called the author. And you still own the content because it's your idea, and you hired a ghostwriter that you're working with. So it doesn't minimize the process at all. You're still involved in that process.
Okay, I got to ask, Michael, how many books out there are ghostwritten, do you think?
When you walk into a bookstore, 90% of those books are ghostwritten.
What?
Yeah.
That is crazy. Oh my gosh. Jeez, I got to get on the bandwagon.
Okay. Ghostwritten books sell more effectively because when the mind trust of the publishing house, see, we don't just use one ghostwriter per project. We have about 6 to 8 ghostwriters that touch every project. And so when you have that many people collaborating on a project, it becomes more of a mastermind. And you're writing the book backwards. You're figuring out who is the reader, what action do we want the reader to take? And so we're beginning with that in mind. So totally. Question on the process, if you brought me a vomit draft today, we would have you up and pre-selling within 2 weeks, and we'd have your book delivered within a month. But now for ghostwriting you, we would have your book cover up and pre-selling within 2 weeks, and we'd have your book delivered and going live within 90 days.
Oh. So what's really interesting is I'm in the process of writing the very detailed outline of my next book. And it's taking me a really long time because even though they always say your second book is much easier than your first, you also get to be, I'm more critical now. Like I know what I know. And so it's so interesting to hear you say this. I do want to ask you, one of your many specialties is how can you actually build a business around a book? There's a lot of people out there that are like, once I have the book, what can I really do with the book?
That's a great question. President Abraham Lincoln said, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And nothing sharpens your axe more than the writing process, because it really is a personal growth journey for you, as you probably found. But what the book does, it becomes the anchor tenant to your real estate portfolio called intellectual property. It becomes that anchor tenant that you build everything around: the mastermind, the coaching program. It becomes your lead magnet. It becomes your client. It becomes your referral partner, because even if somebody never reads your book, and let's face it, the average book buyer and reader never reads past page 9, but they never throw your book away either. And the fact that your book is on their bookshelf or their desk, it is so important. I have one of my clients, Seth Green, recently. He's doing his 9th book, and he gave away his 7th or 8th book to a client. And he picked up a $200 million financial portfolio client as a result of giving away a $20 book. I said, Seth, are you going to keep giving away books? He says, I'm never going to stop giving away books.
My heart sank when you said most people don't read past the 9th page. At least I'm going to get the one big story I think I have within the first 9 pages, but I'm like, oh God.
Hilary, here's the flip side. Those that do read to the end, right? Mm-hmm. Those that do read to the end, they're ready to spend $20,000 with you. So if you're not pitching an offer in your book, you're missing out, because those that get to the end, their family, they'll go to the ends of the earth with you, and they're just wanting to buy everything you have.
Okay. So I know people are like, okay, the basic costs associated with this hybrid approach. What could people be thinking about from a cost? If I want to do this in 2024, what am I looking at?
Oh, sure, sure. So our basic publishing is $49.97, $4,997. People can jump on my calendar and ask me questions. I will give a free consult to your viewers, to your listeners at getpublished.beyondpublishing.net. Just jump on the calendar. It's a 30-minute free book consult valued at $500. And I'll give you feedback on your cover, your title, what you're wanting to do with your book, run some ideas by me. And that'd be a lot of fun to explore what you're going to do with your book, because everybody's goal is different. Some people just want to mark it off their bucket list and say, hey, I wrote my book. It was my memoirs, and they don't really want to sell any books. Some people really want to create a movement with their book. And so that's a different conversation.
Michael, that is such a generous offer. We'll definitely put it in the show notes as well. And if you're talking ghostwriting, what can you be looking at out there?
Yeah, if you price ghostwriting, it's anywhere between $40,000 and $50,000 and can take up to a year to ghostwrite a book. Our ghostwriting starts at $15,000, and typically we're done ghostwriting a book that the author's proud of within 90 to 120 days, depending on how quickly the author gets back to us on their edits and their feedback. So we're talking weekly to the author. We're getting feedback. We're providing content. The main thing, once we figure out who the reader is and what action we want them to take, we give you the synopsis within 2 weeks. Once the synopsis is approved, we come up with a cover design, begin pre-selling once you approve the cover. And then it's just a matter of communicating every week and adding stories and tweaking the stories to make it work. Because we've already got the structure, it's just putting the stories together.
And then after you've written the book, you take it, this is where you were saying is your differentiator, you take it and you help get it into all of the different locations, not just Amazon. And so is there a different package for that? I'm just trying to give people an idea of what to expect.
Oh, sure, sure. So we take all of our authors and we put it into our global catalog. We take your book to all the major book shows of the world. We market you and promote you on our social media, our websites, our national press releases. We give you your first media interview at no cost, and then we push you out through our podcast network. We just had a lady in her early 70s who's a faith author from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. She's never been in the media, and we pushed her through our podcast network. She set up her profile like we told her. She got 18 media interviews within 3 weeks, Hilary. Incredible.
That is amazing. Okay, so we're at 11:11. What a brilliant way to wrap this up right now. So if you were to give somebody out there who is feeling a little stuck with writing their book, besides giving you a call with your generous offer for a 30-minute, consult, what would you say they should be doing to kind of move forward?
Realize the world needs your book, and realize that it's a personal journey, that even if you don't publish it for the next year or two, it will take you on a spiritual journey and a path that will transform your life, and your friends and family will notice a difference just in the introspection that you've done. You can actually go to credibilitybook.live and check out my course. It is the How to Write Your Book in 1 Hour that's wrapped in credibilitybook.live, and it will help you discover who you are as a person. It'll help you figure out here's the thing, Hilary. I planted a garden in Texas at my house this year because when I was a kid, we had a 1-acre farm, and Dad took my brother and I to shovel horse manure. And I'm like, why are we shoveling horse manure? I'm 7 years old. And it's because everybody enjoys the watermelon and the cantaloupe and the strawberries, but nobody wants to shovel horse manure. And as you're writing your book, you're going to move a lot of horse manure.
That is so true.
When I was in South Africa pre-COVID, we did a book launch on a Saturday morning. There were 2,000 women came out in Pretoria, South Africa, and they were there for 5 hours. These women are so hungry for transformation and being a blessing in each other's life. Nobody wanted to leave. And the point I wanted to make with that is you're going to shovel a lot of horse manure, but the South Africans taught me something when I was there. And they said, listen, we're famous for our diamond mines, but we have to move 200 tons of dirt to get 1 ounce of diamond. And there is so much diamonds. There's so much greatness on the inside of you. And once you get past the pain and the trauma that you've been through in your life, those things that are buried deep inside of you, God's going to bring them out and bring them to the world. But 90% of what you journaled about during your pain of coming out of your trauma, 90% of that won't be in the book, and it won't need to be, because listen, once it sprouts up and gets the sunshine and the water, it starts to bear fruit. And that's the purpose of the book, is to get you out of your pain, out of your trauma, and into your purpose so you can start bearing fruit and sharing that delicious story with the world.
Oh, Michael D. Butler. Okay, let's do one more. How can people find you?
Well, the best way is jump on my calendar. You can put it in the show notes. It's getpublished.beyondpublishing.net. I'll give you a free 30-minute consult. I'll give you feedback. There's a time to publish the pain, and there's a time to tell a story, a parable, a fiction story about the pain. And sometimes you just go straight for the platform and start speaking about it. And depending on if you're a therapist or if you're a coach or whatever you want to do, let's figure out what you want to do. Build a business behind the book, around the book. And a lot of times you'll create a workbook or you'll create a mastermind that'll really change people's lives. And one of my clients recently was speaking to 30 people. And I said, did you sell some books? He said, I didn't sell any books. And he said, I did make $30,000 though. So he enrolled everybody into his coaching program. Everybody got a free book.
And then they got a free book. I like that. Well, listen, Michael D. Butler, thank you for being on the Relaunch podcast. And this was so valuable. I am sure so many people out there are like, you know what, take that first step. And everybody, remember, when you live now, you love now. Relaunch is also about taking what you have inside of you, the true story, and creating something that can impact others. And your story will impact. So make sure you give Michael D. Butler get on his schedule and make it happen. Make that one of your crazy, I call them scazy goals in this next year. Scary and crazy. Just do it. Anyway, thank you again, Michael D. Butler, for being here.
Thank you, Hilary. It was a blast, and keep up the great work. Love relaunching with you.
Thank you. If you like this video and want to get more like it, head over here.